The phone rang at 2:17 in the morning, cutting through the silence of my empty apartment like a rusty blade. After 16 years as a paramedic in this godforsaken city, I knew that calls at this hour meant one of two things. Someone was dying, or someone was about to wish they were dead. I rolled over in bed, my back screaming from another brutal double shift, and grabbed the phone without checking the caller ID. My voice came out rough as sandpaper. Jason here. She's busy right now. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The voice wasn't familiar, but the arrogance dripping from those 4 words hit me like a slap. Male, probably mid-40s, the kind of entitled tone that screamed money and privilege. In the background, I could hear something that made me freeze. Tessa's laugh. Not just any laugh, the one she used to save for me. The one that made me fall in love with her 17 years ago when we were both broke college kids sharing ramen noodles and dreams. The laugh that had been absent from our marriage for the past 2 years. No worries, man, I said, my voice steady despite the fact that my world was crashing down around me. She's your problem now. I hung up and immediately blocked both numbers, hers and whatever asshole had answered her phone. Then I sat there in the dark, staring at the rain streaking down my bedroom window, listening to the city breathe around me. The brownstone apartment I'd been renting since our separation 2 months ago suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in like a coffin. Outside, the streets of our mid-sized northeastern city gleamed wet under the streetlights, and I could hear the distant wail of an ambulance. Probably one of my colleagues heading to save someone's life while mine fell apart. I should have seen this coming. Hell, I had seen it coming. The late meetings at the hospital where she worked as an administrator. The new perfume. The way she'd started looking at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. The cold distance that had grown between us like cancer. But hearing another man answer her phone at 2 in the morning. That was a knife twist I hadn't prepared for. I got up and walked to the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and popped it open. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the steady patter of rain against the windows. This place was supposed to be temporary, just until Tessa and I figured things out. Until we remembered how to be married. Apparently, she'd figured it out just fine. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Myers, the 60-something neighborhood gossip who lived in the apartment below mine. The woman had made it her life's mission to know everyone's business. Saw Tessa's car at that fancy high-rise downtown again tonight. Just thought you should know, honey. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. Mrs. Myers meant well, but her updates on my wife's whereabouts only confirmed what I already knew. Tessa had moved on, and she'd moved up. The fancy high-rise Mrs. Myers mentioned was where the city's elite lived. Doctors, lawyers, politicians. People who drove cars that cost more than I made in 2 years. People who looked at guys like me, blue-collar, working class, hands dirty from actually doing something useful, like we were invisible. I took a long pull from my beer and walked to the window. The city sprawled out below me, a maze of old brownstones and newer developments, all of it washed gray in the pre-dawn rain. Somewhere out there, my wife was in bed with someone else. Someone who could give her the life she'd decided she deserved. The thought should have made me angry. Instead, I felt something colder, more calculating. Anger was hot and stupid. What I felt was precise, sharp as a scalpel. I'd spent 16 years pulling people back from the brink of disaster, patching them up, giving them second chances. I knew how to stay calm under pressure, how to think clearly when everything was falling apart. Those skills weren't just useful in the back of an ambulance. My phone rang again. This time I checked the caller ID. Red Murphy, my old boxing coach and the closest thing to a father I'd had since my dad died when I was 20. Red owned a gym in the old part of town, the kind of place where guys like me went to work out their demons with heavy bags and speed drills. "You awake, kid?" Red's voice was gravelly from 40 years of cigarettes and whiskey. Yeah, I'm awake. Good. Get your ass down here. Gym's open and you sound like you need to hit something. Red had always been able to read me like a book. Even over the phone, he could hear the tension in my voice, the barely controlled rage that I was keeping locked down tight. It's almost 3 a.m, Red. So, I don't sleep much these days anyway. Besides, Mrs. Myers called me, said she saw Tessa's car at some rich boy's place again. Of course she had. Mrs. Myers probably had Red on speed dial for exactly these kinds of updates. The woman ran her own intelligence network. I'll be there in 20, I said. I threw on some workout clothes and headed out into the rain. The streets were mostly empty, except for the occasional taxi and the ever-present police cruisers that prowled the city like sharks. The rain had picked up, turning the world into a watercolor painting where everything bled together at the edges. Red's gym was in the basement of an old brick building that had seen better days. The sign out front was faded and cracked, but the place was solid, real. It smelled like sweat and leather and honest work, everything my marriage apparently wasn't. Red was waiting for me when I walked in, already wrapping his hands despite the early hour. He was in his 60s now, gray-haired and weathered, but still built like a brick wall. He'd been a decent middleweight back in the day, good enough to make some money, but not good enough to get his brains scrambled for it. She finally did it, huh? He said without looking up from his hands. Some guy answered her phone, I said, starting to wrap my own hands. 2 a.m. Red nodded, like this was exactly what he'd expected. You know who? Not yet, but I will. What are you going to do about it? I finished wrapping my hands and looked at the heavy bag hanging in the center of the gym. It was old and patched, held together with duct tape and stubbornness, but it had taken everything I'd thrown at it for the past 15 years. I don't know yet, I said. But I'm not going to just roll over and take it. Red smiled, and it wasn't a nice expression. Good. Never let them see you bleed, kid. Make them pay instead. I spent the next hour working the bag, letting my fists do the talking while my mind worked through the problem. Each punch was measured, controlled, precise. I wasn't just hitting the bag, I was planning. By the time I left the gym, the sun was starting to rise, painting the wet streets in shades of gold and orange. I had a plan forming in my head, still rough around the edges but taking shape. Tessa thought she could humiliate me, throw away 17 years like they meant nothing, and walk away clean. She was about to learn otherwise. I went home, showered, and tried to catch a few hours of sleep before my next shift. But my mind wouldn't shut off. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice. She's busy right now. And Tessa's laugh in the background. At 7:30, my phone rang. Work. Jason, we need you to come in early, said dispatch. Martinez called in sick, and we've got a multi-car accident on the interstate. On my way, I said, grateful for the distraction. The accident scene was chaos. 3 cars, 2 injuries, traffic backed up for miles. I worked on autopilot, doing what I'd been trained to do, compartmentalizing everything else. My partner for the day was Tommy Chen, a 26-year-old rookie who still got excited about the job. You look like hell, Jason, Tommy said as we loaded our second patient into the ambulance. Long night, I said. Woman troubles? I gave him a look that shut down that line of conversation. Tommy was a good kid, but I wasn't in the mood to discuss my personal life with someone who still thought love conquered all. We transported both patients to City General Hospital, the same hospital where Tessa worked. As we wheeled our patient through the emergency room doors, I found myself scanning the corridors, looking for her. I told myself it was just habit, but I knew better. The ER was busy, as always. Nurses and doctors moving with practiced efficiency, the controlled chaos that I'd grown to love about this work. Everyone had a purpose, a role to play. Everyone except me, apparently. I was finishing up the paperwork when I saw him. Dr. Alan Pierce, head of the emergency department. 44 years old, silver-haired, the kind of guy who looked like he'd stepped out of a medical drama. He was talking to one of the nurses, his hand resting casually on her arm in a way that was just professional enough to avoid a harassment complaint, but intimate enough to make his interest clear. I'd seen him around for years, of course. He had a reputation as a brilliant doctor and a world-class asshole, the kind of man who treated nurses like servants and paramedics like taxi drivers. I'd never liked him, but I'd never had a reason to hate him, until now. Because as I watched him charm the nurse, I realized something that hit me like a physical blow. I knew that voice. The arrogant, entitled tone that had answered Tessa's phone at 2 a.m. Dr. Alan Pierce was the man screwing my wife. I finished my paperwork and left the hospital without saying a word to anyone. Tommy asked if I was okay, but I just nodded and kept walking. I needed to get out of there before I did something that would end my career and land me in jail. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray and threatening. I sat in the ambulance in the parking lot for 10 minutes, just breathing, trying to process this new information. Alan Pierce. Of course it was Alan Pierce. Tessa had always been ambitious, always wanted more than what I could give her. A paramedic's salary wasn't going to buy her the house in the suburbs or the luxury vacations she'd started hinting about. But a department head at the city's biggest hospital? That was a different story entirely. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Kayla. "Coffee later? I have news about your divorce papers." Kayla was a divorce lawyer, sharp as a razor, and twice as cutting. She'd been handling my separation from Tessa, though we hadn't filed the actual papers yet. I'd been hoping we could work things out. That hope was officially dead now. I texted back, "Yeah, usual place, 6 o'clock. The usual place was Murphy's Bar, a dive on the east side of town where the beer was cheap and the clientele minded their own business. It was the kind of place where a paramedic and a lawyer could sit in a corner booth and plot revenge without anyone paying attention. I spent the rest of my shift running calls, a heart attack, a domestic dispute, a kid who'd fallen off his bike. Normal stuff, the kind of routine emergencies that kept the city running. But my mind kept drifting back to Alan Pierce and the sound of Tessa's laugh. By 6 o'clock, I was ready to drink. Murphy's was exactly as advertised. Dim, smoky, despite the no-smoking laws, filled with the kind of people who had given up on impressing anyone. Kayla was already there, sitting in our usual booth with a whiskey in front of her. She looked up as I approached, and I could see the sympathy in her eyes. "You look terrible," she said by way of greeting. "Thanks. You always know just what to say." I slid into the booth across from her and signaled the bartender for a beer. "I heard about last night," she said. "Mrs. Myers called me." "Of course she did." I shook my head. "That woman should work for the CIA." "She's worried about you. We all are." My beer arrived, and I took a long pull before responding. "I found out who he is." Kayla raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "Dr. Alan Pierce, head of emergency at City General." Kayla let out a low whistle. "Tessa doesn't mess around, does she? Going straight to the top?" "Apparently not." "So what do you want to do about it?" That was Kayla, always straight to the point. She'd been practicing divorce law for 8 years, and she'd seen every variation of marital warfare imaginable. She knew that some clients wanted a clean break, while others wanted to burn everything down. "I want them to pay," I said. "Both of them." Kayla smiled, and it was a predatory expression that reminded me why she was so good at her job. "Now you're talking my language. What did you have in mind?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not going to just roll over and let them walk all over me." "Good, because I've been doing some digging, and there are a few things you should know about your wife's new boyfriend." She pulled out a manila folder and spread several documents across the table: bank statements, property records, professional licensing information. "Dr. Pierce has a very comfortable lifestyle," she said. Nice apartment downtown, expensive car, country club membership. But here's the interesting part. He's been through 2 messy divorces in the past 10 years. Both times his ex-wives accused him of having affairs with hospital staff. I studied the documents, my mind already working through the implications. So this is a pattern for him. Looks like it. And here's the really interesting part. His current contract with the hospital has a morality clause. If he's caught in any kind of scandal that reflects poorly on the institution, they can terminate him without severance. I looked up at my sister, seeing the gleam in her eyes. You think we can use that? I think there are a lot of ways we can use this information. The question is, how far are you willing to go? I thought about Tessa's laugh, about the casual arrogance in Pierce's voice when he'd answered her phone, about 17 years of marriage thrown away like garbage. As far as it takes, I said. Kayla nodded and started gathering up the documents. Then let's get to work. Over the next week, I threw myself into research with the same methodical precision I brought to my job. Every spare moment was spent gathering information, building a complete picture of my targets and their vulnerabilities. Tessa, I knew better than anyone. 17 years of marriage had taught me exactly what buttons to push. She was ambitious, image-conscious, and terrified of public humiliation. Her job at the hospital was everything to her, not just the income, but the status, the respect, the feeling that she was important. Dr. Pierce was a different challenge, but Kayla's research had given me a starting point. He was arrogant, entitled, and apparently incapable of keeping it in his pants. More importantly, he was careless. A man who answered his mistress's phone at 2 a.m. wasn't thinking about consequences. That carelessness was going to be his downfall. My first move was financial. Tessa and I still had joint accounts. She'd been too busy with her new boyfriend to change them. I didn't clean them out entirely. That would have been too obvious and potentially illegal. Instead, I made strategic transfers. The money for Chloe's college fund went into a trust that only I controlled. The emergency savings went into a new account in my name only. I also canceled Tessa's car insurance and credit cards, all of which were in my name. When she called, furious, I let it go to voicemail. Jason, what the hell do you think you're doing? My cards aren't working, and the insurance company says my policy was canceled. Call me back right now. I deleted the message and blocked her number. Next, I started working on Pierce. The man had an ego the size of Texas and a social media presence to match. His Instagram was full of photos from expensive restaurants, exotic vacations, and charity galas. He loved showing off his lifestyle, which made him an easy target. I created several fake accounts and started following him, liking his posts, leaving comments. Nothing obvious or threatening, just enough activity to get on his radar. I also started following Tessa's social media accounts, watching for any posts that might give away their relationship. It didn't take long. 3 days after I started watching, Tessa posted a photo from an expensive restaurant downtown. The caption read, "Amazing dinner with a special friend." In the background of the selfie, just barely visible, was Pierce's distinctive silver hair. I screenshot the photo and sent it anonymously to the hospital's HR department with a note. Thought you should know about Dr. Pierce's special friendships with staff members. That was just the opening move. My next target was their social circle. Tessa had always been obsessed with what other people thought, and she'd cultivated a group of friends from the hospital who shared her ambitions and pretensions. These women, I thought of them as the Mean Girls Club, spent their time gossiping, shopping, and judging everyone around them. They were also incredibly competitive and petty, which made them perfect weapons. I started with Sarah Mitchell, a nurse supervisor who'd always resented Tessa's position in hospital administration. Sarah was smart, vindictive, and had been passed over for promotions that she felt Tessa had helped block. I didn't approach Sarah directly. Instead, I made sure she found out about Tessa's affair in the most humiliating way possible. I created a fake email account and sent Sarah a message that appeared to come from the hospital's IT department. "We're updating our security protocols and need you to verify some recent unusual network activity. Please review the attached logs and let us know if you recognize any of these access patterns." The logs I attached were actually screenshots of Tessa's social media activity, including several photos that made her relationship with Pierce obvious to anyone who knew what to look for. I also included some creative fiction about after-hours access to Pierce's office computer. Sarah took the bait beautifully. Within 24 hours, the entire hospital was buzzing with gossip about Tessa and Pierce. By the end of the week, their affair was the worst-kept secret in the building. But I wasn't done yet. The thing about hospital gossip is that it spreads like a virus, jumping from department to department, growing and mutating as it goes. By the time it reached the hospital board, the story had evolved into something much more damaging than a simple affair. Now there were whispers about favoritism, about Tessa using her position to benefit Pierce's department, about financial irregularities and abuse of power. None of it was true, but truth wasn't the point. Perception was everything. I watched it all unfold from the sidelines, making my regular runs to the hospital, listening to the gossip, feeding the fire with carefully placed comments and strategic questions. "Hey, did you hear about the audit they're doing in administration?" I'd say to one of the nurses. Something about expense reports and conference trips. Or, "Weird how Dr. Pierce got that new equipment approved so fast. Usually takes months to get through the bureaucracy." Each comment was innocent by itself, but together they painted a picture of corruption and abuse that the hospital board couldn't ignore. 2 weeks after I'd started my campaign, Kayla called with an update. "They're both suspended pending an internal investigation," she said, unable to keep the satisfaction out of her voice. "Full pay for now, but they're banned from the hospital grounds." "What's the investigation about?" "Officially, potential conflicts of interest and violations of the hospital's ethics policies. Unofficially, the board is scared shitless about a potential scandal. They're trying to get ahead of it before it becomes a public relations nightmare." I felt a surge of satisfaction, but it was tempered by the knowledge that this was just the beginning. Suspension wasn't enough. I wanted them destroyed. "What's next?" I asked. "Now we wait," Kayla said. "Let them panic. Let them make mistakes. Desperate people do stupid things." She was right. Over the next few days, both Tessa and Pierce started making increasingly frantic attempts to control the narrative. Pierce hired a crisis management firm and started giving interviews to local media about his exemplary record and dedication to patient care. Tessa tried to rally her friends at the hospital, calling in favors and trying to position herself as the victim of a malicious rumor campaign. Their efforts only made things worse. The media attention brought scrutiny from outside the hospital, and investigative reporters started digging into both of their backgrounds. Pierce's previous divorces became public knowledge, along with the allegations of affairs and professional misconduct. Tessa's educational credentials came under review, and someone discovered that her MBA from a prestigious university was actually from an online diploma mill. I watched it all unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and cold calculation. This was just the opening act. The real show was about to begin. Because while they were busy trying to save their careers, I was planning something much more personal. Something that would hit them where it really hurt. I was going to destroy them in front of the entire city, and I was going to enjoy every minute of it. The breaking point came 3 weeks after the suspensions, at Chloe's school talent show. My 15-year-old daughter was performing a piano piece she'd been working on for months, and despite everything that had happened between Tessa and me, I wasn't going to miss it. I arrived at the school auditorium early, hoping to avoid any drama. The place was packed with parents, siblings, and extended family members, all there to support their kids. It should have been a normal, wholesome evening. Of course, nothing in my life was normal anymore. I was sitting in the third row, checking the program to see when Chloe would perform, when I felt someone sit down next to me. I looked up to see Tessa, looking perfectly put together despite everything that had happened. Behind her, like some kind of entitled shadow, was Dr. Alan Pierce. "Hello, Jason," Tessa said, her voice carefully neutral. "I thought we should talk." "This isn't the place," I said, not looking at Pierce. "You've made every other place impossible," she said. "You've blocked my calls, changed the locks, frozen our accounts. What was I supposed to do?" "Maybe not screw your boss," I suggested, still not raising my voice. Around us, other parents were starting to notice the tension, conversations dying as people turned to watch our little drama unfold. Pierce leaned forward, his voice carrying that same arrogant tone I'd heard on the phone. "Look, friend, I think you're embarrassing yourself here. Maybe we should take this outside." I turned to look at him for the first time, taking in the expensive suit, the perfectly styled hair, the condescending smile. This was the man who had destroyed my marriage, and he was sitting there like he owned the world. "Friend?" I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "That's interesting. I don't usually make friends with people who answer my wife's phone at 2 in the morning. The conversations around us stopped entirely now. Everyone was listening, waiting to see what would happen next. Tessa's face flushed red. "Jason, please, not here." "Why not here?" I asked, my voice still calm and reasonable. "These are all good people, pillars of the community. I'm sure they'd love to hear about hospital values and keeping things professional." I stood up, turning to address the crowd that had gathered around us. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Dr. Alan Pierce, head of emergency medicine at City General Hospital. He's here tonight to support his girlfriend's daughter. Oh, wait, did I mention that his girlfriend is my wife?" The reaction was immediate and electric. Gasps, whispers, the sound of phones being pulled out to record the confrontation. Pierce's face went white, then red, then white again. "You son of a bitch," he said, starting to stand up. "Language, doctor," I said. "There are children present." Pierce took a step toward me, his hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually try to hit me. I almost hoped he would. It would make the video that much better. But before he could do anything stupid, the school principal appeared, flanked by 2 security guards. "Gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask you to take this outside," the principal said. "This is a school event." "Of course," I said, all reason and cooperation. "I apologize for the disruption. I was just introducing my wife's boyfriend to some of the other parents. I thought they should know what kind of people represent our local hospital." As we were escorted out, I could see parents pulling out their phones, texting and posting to social media. By tomorrow morning, the whole city would know about Dr. Pierce and his affair with a married hospital administrator. Outside in the parking lot, Pierce finally lost what was left of his composure. "You think you're clever?" he snarled. "You think this little stunt is going to accomplish anything? You're just a paramedic, for Christ's sake. A nobody. I could destroy you with a phone call." "Really?" I said. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're the one getting destroyed. How's that suspension working out for you, doctor?" "You did this," Tessa said, her voice shaking with rage. "The rumors, the investigation, it was all you." "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said. "I'm just a paramedic, remember? A nobody. How could I possibly orchestrate something so sophisticated?" Pierce stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. "This isn't over," he said. "You're right," I agreed. "It's not." That night, I sat in my apartment watching the videos that parents had posted online. The confrontation had been captured from multiple angles and was already going viral on local social media. The comments were brutal. Disgusting behavior from a doctor who's supposed to be a role model. Poor guy, his wife cheats on him and he handles it with class. Dr. Pierce should be fired immediately. This is not the kind of person who should be treating patients. That paramedic has balls, good for him. But the best part wasn't the social media reaction. It was the phone call I received at 11:30 that night from an unknown number. "Jason?" The voice was young, female, nervous. "Yeah? This is Amanda Walsh. I'm a nurse at City General. I was at the talent show tonight." "Okay. I wanted you to know that you're not alone in this. Dr. Pierce, he's done this before. A lot. And some of us have been trying to do something about it for years." "What do you mean?" "I mean there are at least 6 nurses who have stories about him. Harassment, abuse of power, affairs with married staff members. We've been documenting everything, but we needed someone to make the first move." I sat up straighter. "What kind of documentation?" "Photos, emails, witness statements, enough to end his career and probably put him in jail." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you started something tonight that we couldn't finish on our own. And because that bastard needs to pay for what he's done." After I hung up, I called Kayla. "Did you see the videos?" I asked. "Are you kidding? The whole city saw the videos. You're trending on Twitter." "Good, because things are about to get a lot more interesting." I told her about Amanda's call, about the other nurses who were ready to come forward. "This is it," Kayla said. "This is how we finish them both." "What do you need from me?" "Nothing. Just sit back and watch the show. By the time this is over, Pierce won't be able to get a job cleaning bedpans, and Tessa will be lucky if she can find work answering phones." As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Genuine happiness. Not satisfaction or vindication, but actual joy. The war was almost over, and I was winning. The next morning brought news that exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. Amanda Walsh hadn't been exaggerating when she said other nurses were ready to come forward. By the time I got to work, 6 different women had filed formal complaints against Dr. Pierce with both the hospital administration and the state medical board. The local news picked up the story by noon, and suddenly my confrontation at the school talent show was being replayed on every channel in the city. The headlines were brutal. Hospital doctor accused of serial harassment. Married administrator caught in affair scandal. City General employees demand accountability. I was in the ambulance with Tommy when my phone started ringing. Reporters mostly, but also friends and colleagues who wanted to know if I was okay. I let them all go to voicemail. "You're famous," Tommy said, grinning as he drove us to our next call. "Infamous, maybe." "Are you kidding? You're a hero. That doctor sounds like a real piece of work." Tommy was right. As more details emerged about Pierce's pattern of behavior, public opinion solidified firmly against him. The man who had seemed so powerful and untouchable just a few weeks ago was now a pariah. But it was the afternoon news that delivered the knockout punch. I was grabbing lunch at a diner near the hospital when the story broke. The reporter was standing outside City General, looking serious and professional as she delivered the news. "In a stunning development, City General Hospital has announced the immediate termination of Dr. Alan Pierce, following multiple allegations of harassment and abuse of power. The hospital's board of directors held an emergency meeting this morning and voted unanimously to end Dr. Pierce's employment, effective immediately." The reporter continued. "In a related development, hospital administrator Tessa Morgan has also been terminated, following an internal investigation that revealed multiple policy violations and conflicts of interest. Sources close to the investigation say that Morgan used her position to provide preferential treatment to Dr. Pierce's department, including unauthorized expense approvals and scheduling accommodations." I sat there in the diner, watching my wife's career implode on live television, and felt absolutely nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, no anger. Just a cold, empty feeling where my marriage used to be. My phone rang. "Kayla, are you watching the news?" she asked. "Yeah. How do you feel?" "Tired," I said, and realized it was true. I was exhausted, drained by weeks of planning and scheming and plotting revenge. "It's not over yet," Kayla said. Tessa's going to come at you hard now. She's got nothing left to lose. She was right. That evening, I came home to find Tessa waiting in the hallway outside my apartment, her face streaked with tears and mascara. "You destroyed me," she said, her voice raw with emotion. "You destroyed both of us." "I didn't do anything," I said, fishing for my keys. "You did this to yourself." "Bullshit. This whole thing has your fingerprints all over it." I unlocked my door and turned to face her. "Even if that were true, what did you expect? You threw away 17 years of marriage for what? Money? Status? A bigger apartment?" "I expected you to be a man about it," she said. "I expected you to have some dignity." I laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. "Dignity? You want to talk about dignity? You screwed your boss and then had him answer your phone when I called. Where was your dignity then? I never meant for you to find out that way." "How did you mean for me to find out? Were you planning to tell me? Or were you just going to keep lying until I figured it out myself?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "That's what I thought," I said. "You know what the funny thing is? If you'd just been honest with me, if you'd just said you wanted a divorce, I would have given it to you. No drama, no public humiliation, no destroyed careers. But you had to be greedy. You had to have it all. So you decided to destroy my life? I decided to show the world who you really are. The rest was just consequences." Tessa stared at me for a long moment, her face cycling through anger, hurt, and finally resignation. "I'm going to take you for everything you have," she said finally. "Good luck with that," I said. "You're going to need it." The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, depositions, and media attention. The story had grown beyond just a local scandal. National news outlets picked it up as an example of corruption in healthcare administration. Pierce hired expensive lawyers and tried to fight the charges, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. He eventually agreed to surrender his medical license in exchange for avoiding criminal prosecution. Tessa tried to salvage something from the wreckage, but her options were limited. The fake MBA degree that reporters had discovered made her unemployable in hospital administration, and her association with Pierce had made her toxic to potential employers. She ended up taking a job as a receptionist at a dental office across town. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Kayla had done her homework, and Tessa's adultery combined with her professional misconduct made it impossible for her to claim any significant assets. She got a small settlement and limited visitation rights with Chloe, who had chosen to live with me full-time. On the day the divorce was finalized, I sat in my lawyer's office signing the last of the paperwork, officially ending 17 years of marriage. Kayla watched me sign my name with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Free," I said, and meant it. That night, I took Chloe out to dinner to celebrate. She'd been through hell during the whole ordeal, caught between her parents' war, but she'd handled it with remarkable maturity. "Are you happy it's over?" she asked over dessert. "Yeah," I said. "I am." "Good. You deserve better than what Mom gave you." "Your mother isn't a bad person, Chloe. She just made some bad choices." "She made a lot of bad choices," Chloe said. "But you handled it perfectly. You didn't lose your temper, you didn't do anything illegal, you just let her destroy herself. Sometimes the best revenge is just giving people enough rope to hang themselves with." "Is that what this was? Revenge?" I thought about it for a moment. "No," I said finally. "It was justice. There's a difference." 3 months later, I was working a late shift when we got called to a domestic dispute in the expensive part of town. As we pulled up to the address, I realized it was Pierce's apartment building. The man himself was sitting on the curb when we arrived, his face red and his expensive shirt torn. His neighbor, apparently, had gotten tired of the loud arguments and constant police calls and had decided to take matters into his own hands. "You're going to be okay," I told Pierce as I cleaned the red stains from his face. "Looks worse than it is." He stared at me for a long moment, recognition dawning in his eyes. You, he said. Me, I agreed. You destroyed my life. No, I said, applying antiseptic to his cuts. You did that all by yourself. I just made sure people found out about it. As we loaded him into the ambulance, Pierce grabbed my arm. Was it worth it? He asked. All this destruction, all this pain, was it worth it? I looked down at him, this man who had thought he was untouchable, who had believed his money and position made him immune to consequences. Ask me in a year, I said, but I already knew the answer. It was worth every minute.